Hello everyone, this is Yonsei University EastAsia International class, and we are trying to talk about the East Asian International Management taught by Professor Sean Watts, who is one of the most prestigious professors in Yonsei University. And we would like to talk about the information management systems. As you can see, this is the presentation title. And moving on to the content, we would like to categorize into 6 parts. The first part is the abstract. And the second, introduction, literature review, methodology, conclusion, and references, and so on. So I would like to hand it to one of my group members, Shimyeon Yu, who is going to talk about the abstract and introduction.
The purpose of this research paper is understanding the differences between Western and Eastern users' behaviors of the social network services more in depth. In order to conduct more precise study, the study is mainly divided into 3 parts. First part is the case study, and the second part is surveys, and third part is interview. The first part of the research is close examination on prior case studies on the characteristics of the SNS users and the corporations who utilize the services for their consumer data management and advertising their products. Secondly, to make the study more reliable, a survey on SNS users will be conducted. Thereby, the characteristics from the case studies can be defined and the user's behavior can be detected thoroughly. Lastly, the interviews with the officials from the actual business sectors will confirm the differences of the corporate behaviors in different SNSs, especially China and the United States. As you can see from the chart, the number of the users who are using smartphones and the SNSs are skyrocketing. As more and more people possess smartphones and the personal computers in Korea, so as United States, the desire of these users communicating with others has been tremendously intensified. As you can see from the chart, the extensive use of the portable devices made SNSs become a more integral part of the many individuals' daily lives. This inevitably has made many corporations and organizations to be more proactively responsive to these net-savvy citizens' behaviors online. The social media users is unlike the proper media. The users create content themselves and consume other users' content, meaning that the line between the producers and the consumers becomes more and more vague, and the units of the producer and the units of consumers are unified. This user-generated content system is much more effective than the traditional marketing communications in influencing the attitudes and the behaviors of other users, as the depth of understanding information is tremendously larger than that of the traditional media. Even though there are universal, well-known social media services such as Twitter and Facebook, each country has their own SNS platforms. As you can see from the picture, the South Korean users mainly using KakaoTalk, and Japanese are Fano Line, and Chinese are mainly using Weibo. So from this part, Choi, one of our member of the research team, will introduce the literature review and other content.
Hi, Choi is back. From now on, I'll talk about the literature review regarding social capital QQ, which is the main social media in China. In detail, 485 active million users of QQ clearly illustrates its popularity in China, and they are appealing enough for both companies and consumers in order to build up a virtual engagement. According to social capital in QQ, there's a relational fact between social capital and the dimensionality of virtual engagement, which has been characterized by 4 aspects of information, seeking interaction sharing, and knowledge creating, and purchasing intention. And about the social capital of QQ in China, I would like to talk about the 3 main points of it. The first point is that social identification in the QQ community creates a diverse virtual engagement of QQ consumers. The second, knowledge creating is heavily affected by the other 2 virtual engagement factors, which is information seeking and interaction sharing. The last part is purchasing intention. Purchasing intention toward virtual products is influenced only by social identification, not by knowledge created. And when you look at this diagram over here, you can see that the to what extent do you trust the following forms of advertising? So this clearly shows about the motivations of consumers using social media. And this is where I want to talk about the case study that we're going to present. The case study is the case study of China, which is social networking services adoption in corporate communication. To add on to the case study, the social influence of word of mouth exists in the Chinese market because China is a collectivist culture, which is different from the Western culture, and it is highlighting its interdependence and connectedness. Moreover, Chinese consumers have more peers bonding, and therefore it is much more easier to rely on the social relationship to choose a product or a service. I would like to add more details on the case study. When you combine social media and the peer bonding personality, it concludes to a trust. The trust can be built by a positive electronic word of mouth among the Chinese consumers using SNS sites. And moving on to the methodology part, as Ximyan Yu said, there are three main parts: the case study, the survey, and the interview. And under that, there are some subcategories that we would like to talk in detail. The case study 1, it is the different characteristics of Chinese and American advertisement on SNS. And to add more on to that, there are three categorized types of interactivity on the internet. The first is human-to-computer interactivity. Second, human-to-human interactivity. Third, human-to-content interactivity. However, we found out that the relation between public and SNS is unknown. Regarding the case study that we found, we came up with the question that what strategies do companies in China and the United States use to cultivate relationship with public on SNSs? So we found out 6 categories of online activities: information seeking, information reply, unsolicited information, emotional support, advocacy, and conflict. And there are 2 other questions that we would like to also further ask to you guys. That the first is, what are the patterns of communal participation as reflected in public posts on corporate SNS pages? The second, what are the differences in patterns of public participation between corporate pages on Facebook, which is the well-known social media in the United States, and Everland, which is the most widely known SNS page in China? And also, you can see there are 2 different types of context. Context is a situational information that is inevitable for one to gain for understanding the meaning of an event or a subject. The first category of the context is low context. Low context is that most of the information is already inside the person, while very little is in the coded, explicit, and transmitted part of the message. On the other hand, high context. The high context is that most of the information is already inside the person, while very little is in the coded, explicit, transmitted part of the message. The case study suggests 2 hypotheses. The first hypothesis is that compared to the corporate messages on American SNSs, those on Chinese SNSs are less likely to convey direct and explicit information about products, promotions, or companies. The second hypothesis is that compared to corporate messages on American SNSs, those on Chinese SNSs are more likely to contain indirect and implicit information such as product-related educational or entertainment information, or further, even messages that are irrelevant to the product or company. The case study also done a sampling in order to intensify their credibility. The case study suggests a great sampling. The case study utilized 100 corporate profile pages, 50 from Runrun and 50 from Facebook. The study has analyzed all 50 corporate pages available on Runrun at the time of the investigation. From this diagram, you can see the relationship cultivation strategies that are different from China and the United States. The case study has shown a great results. The corporate pages on RunRun were more likely to provide organizational contact information such as addresses, physical addresses, and telephone numbers. In terms of creating a complete dialogue loop, Chinese companies responded to users' posts more frequently than their American counterparts. In many cases on Facebook, on the other hand, the company may have initiated a series of discussions by posting a question or a comment to solicit responses. The company did not respond to or interact with the user's comments. Further regarding the results, in general, the most common types on both sites included informational seeking. For example, of the information seeking can be, where can I find a Coca-Cola, Orange, or where can I find a Pepsi? However, RunRun users were less likely to post criticisms and complaints about the organization's products or services, while RunRun users were more likely to inquire about product information and to engage in conversations that were not product or company related. The two countries did not differ significantly across the categories of product promotion and company-specific information. Therefore, the hypothesis 1 was not correct, so therefore it was rejected. However, corporate posts on Facebook tended to follow the hard sell approach by frequently providing information directly related to the company and its offerings. In contrast, corporate posts on RunRun were more likely to emphasize product-related information and further entertainment information in order to feature messages completely irrelevant to the company or its product. Our group would like to suggest another case study in order to show more information to you guys. We would like to suggest another case study. Before we move on to the second case study, I would like to show you this diagram. This diagram indicates the social network users and the penetration in China from 2011 to 2013. As you can see from the graph above, the number of social media users are rapidly increasing annually. This reflects the fact that companies cannot disregard the potential impact on the companies. Moving on to the second case study, the corporate pages on social networking sites, which refers to SNS, have becoming the key platform where publics interact with companies and organizations around the world. Focusing on one of the important world economies, China, this study is trying to explore the types of public engagement along with the corporate pages leading Chinese SNSs as well as motivations. Given the participatory and communal nature of SNSs, this case study proposed a conceptual model incorporating social media dependency and several social relationship factors. In order to show this, the case study conducted a survey with a random sample of 245 Chinese SNS users in order to test the proposed model. Among the questions and the hypothesis this case study is trying to deal with, there is an important question that must be mentioned and dealt with. The question is, what are the main motivations of Chinese using social media? From this diagram, you can see the descriptive of user motivations in visiting, liking companies' SNS pages. We found out that there are 6 main motivations of Chinese online users. The first is entertainment, second, social interaction, personal identification, information, empowerment, and remuneration. In order to conclude the second case study, the study shows that the respondents liked or visited a company's RunRun or Weibo page mainly for information purposes, followed by entertainment and social integration purposes. In addition, communication strategies should be focused on soliciting user-generated content, such as product reviews and product-related tips, user-shared pictures, videos, and stories. And also, we have conducted a survey, as one of our group members have previously mentioned. There are mainly 7 questions in order to examine the user behaviors of the SNSs. And we will now talk about the interviews in order to examine the corporation behaviors on the SNSs. As we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we interviewed three executives of Samsung. The first person is Chung Up An, who is the vice president of the Samsung Securities. And I would like to introduce some questions regarding the interview that we done. The first interview that we done to Chung Up An, I would like to present a important question that we asked him. The question is that regarding the use of social media advertisement, companies tend to use social media in order to introduce the company itself, such as showing their latest product, while others take the opportunities to investigate consumers' preferences. Between the two, what does Samsung Securities use, and what do you think the expectations could be? And the second interviewee was Dong Hwan Kim, who's the vice president of Samsung Everland, and currently he is now the CEO of Samsung Well Story. One of the questions that we done to him, that we would like to present, is that in the contemporary society, it is inevitable to disregard the impact of social media advertising. Does this apply to Samsung Everland as well? And what are the differences compared to the past when Samsung Everland did not use the social media advertising strategy? The last interviewee is Tae Gun-ji, who is the director of marketing in Samsung Electronics. The important question that we asked to him is that Samsung, which is one of the most widely known companies in the international society, Samsung has started their online marketing through social media. When it comes to advertising the company's products to foreign countries, did the company, Samsung, initially expect such numbers or results social media advertising can bring? So these are the interviews that we've done, and we would like to present the interview results and the conclusion as well after this PPT presentation is done.
In order to confirm the corporation's behaviors in using SNS social medias, so we conducted three interviews. And the first interview for the Samsung Securities. So Samsung Securities said that there is three main types of the SNS. The first type is the square type, and second type is lobby type, and third type is bench type. The typical services for the square type of the SNSs are Facebook, Twitter, and the MySpace. These social network services are often referred to as a spacious square where there are no such benches. In this type of SNS, there is no specific agenda and topics to talk about. The participants are freely communicating with others, having conversations, and socializing with them. When the users become familiar with the SNS, they can make their specific social network with others, increasing their pleasures of communicating with them. However, it also indicates that the newbies of the using services can be confused and feel vacant in the system. The system puts more emphasis on the individuals rather than the information that is codified by the system. Therefore, in such SNSs, the services are freely opened to everyone and served on multi-channel. On the other hand, Korean network services traditionally have provided lobby type of SNSs, such as Cywork and Meet Today. The reason why these services are called lobby type is because it provides specific topics to the visitors to talk about and talk with others. By exposing the inside information through the system, it's easier for the newbies to access to the content rather making the network first. Also, it is more favorable to create the high quality content. However, it also has serious problems. Instead of having profile in system, the open social environment, this type of social media creates the high responsiveness on the specific issues. Thereby, the initial emphasis on accessibility limits the further growth of the social networking, since the system formed artificial network at first. The third type of SNS is bench type. This type of SNS is combination of square type and the lobby type. In order to preserve the nature of the SNS, the relations oriented system, it is more suitable for the SNS to have square type of communication system. Therefore, it can maintain the user's interactions with others. Social networking can be continuous ongoing. However, with the cultural differences such as Koreans do not mingle with unknown random people, the square type of communication cannot effectively grow in these types of country. To overcome this initial difficulty, um, the badge type services provide initial people-to services for the newbies. The typical example of SNS is specific purpose such as Foursquare, Yap, and Instagram. In those social network services, the user's purpose of visiting is distinct. Thus, it's easy for them to fit in system and strengthen their network.
Uh, Furthermore, we would like to talk about the Samsung Securities, one of the most famous app, which is known as Samsung Pop. Due to the prevalence of smartphone, it is hard to think of what people cannot do with their cell phone. Along with the chatting with friends and entertainment factors, even information on stocks and transactions on the stock exchange has become available. Samsung Securities has launched the app called Pop in order to meet consumers' expectations. Further, we would like to talk about the characteristics of POP. Samsung Securities installed a quick title bar among the securities companies so that consumers can move to the page directly and conveniently. Also, market price inquiry is available by one touch. And also, one-stop trading is available, which allows consumers to do multitasking, which meets the Korean consumers' expectations. The differentiation of POP from other SNSs is that POP tries to deal with important information on securities. So when it comes to consumers communicating on corporate pages, the corporate always provide their consumers with credible information so that there will be no bubble or confusion. And also, Samsung Securities organizes the big data in order to match and inform the best preference each consumer might have in mind when it comes to purchasing stocks. And the last differentiation of POP from other SNSs is that compared to other security companies, Samsung Securities launched AIC, which is referred to as Active Investor Club, in order to meet Korean consumers' characteristic where they have the need to watch others' purchase record. Although there are limits regarding to this characteristic due to securities being a sensitive issue, Samsung Securities' idea was clearly and highly successful.
Now I'm talking about Samsung Everland. Samsung Everland has friendly SNS policies in their marketing and management. They concentrate on their marketing in Asia rather than Western nations. The main problem that they have is how to deal with their SNS pages and to increase subscribers who are active in sharing information. The company initially focused in promotion events, offering discounts and other benefits. This approach only has limited and temporary impacts on their SNS pages. Also, they have launched the Samsung Everland Evertoon, which is webtoon, in their Twitter account. Samsung Everland now provides Evertoon, a comic with stories of happening in Everland amusement park. This is new approach for company and it constantly gains the viewers. They research the cultural preference in different nations such as Gold Monkey for attracting Chinese visitors. Um, and we had an interview with workers from Everland and they said their permanent goal is to create their images like one Disneyland has. SNS is an important tool for advertisement. However, without frequent updates of attractive services, it is very easy to be neglected by SNS users. So they said their value of one form identity like Mickey Mouse works more than any other advertising method. This is basically what we have for Everland.
Hi, my name is Hyun Young. I'm going to talk about how to get internships. I will explain some important points you must be aware of to get internships. I'm a member of research team in EastAsia Business and Management in one of prominent university in Korea, Yonsei University. My contact details are posted on bottom of this section. As you know, many university students are desperate to find internships to develop their future careers. However, many disregard those factors and it leads you to failure. Let's start with the factor 1. Know what you're capable of. This is one of tactics from the Art of War written by Sun Tzu. It is essential to know what you want to do and what you're really interested in. The second is know what companies want. Getting a job is similar to selling yourself to others. You must have to know what kind of person the companies want to hire. After this process is done, you can match up your specs with the company's needs. Third, be professional. This is the process of packaging yourself to be more attractive. Frequently expose yourself to others. In order to appeal yourself, post your contact details and specs in every email, text messages, and any other messaging tools you use. Remember, you want to sell yourself to others. Fourth, frequently update internship offering information. You can find internship offering information from the internet and posters around you. But it is important to keep updating this information because companies' expectations always changes. You must be able to keep up with those changes. At last, make networks. Internship opportunities sometimes just pop up in unexpected ways. Ask successful people around you. They might offer you a super internship. Also, make a group having same interest as you have. They could give you some internship information you didn't know.
At last, we will finally talk about our conclusion that we found out throughout the research. This paper defines the differences between Western and Eastern users of SNSs. Western users generally enjoy the direct information that is related to the products that commercial provides. On the other hand, Eastern users are more linked to indirect information, which is different from the Western users, such as relative pictures, campaign, and the information that look like non-profit persuasion. The case studies that we conducted confirmed these typical characteristics that could be carefully researched when corporations utilize SNS in their marketing. Also, Asian users increase the usefulness of word-of-mouth marketing. They show their preferences to give more trust on the words from their relatives or close friends. This is due to the importance that they put on their guanxi, which can be referred to relations. Thus, if corporations can form word of mouth about their products, then it could have expulsive effects on the consumers' loyalty on their products. Using this peer bonding personality of Asians along with the SNS system, it will certainly lead companies more favorable status in their market. So therefore, it is important for the corporations to use SNSs carefully and cautiously because there are negative word-of-mouth effects. However, there's an important thing that should be noted. One thing that the corporations must recognize is that the SNS and big data should not be the main reason of their marketing. The variations and the diversifications of SNSs will make many different interpretations on the analysis of them. If the corporations make a certain commercials because the analysis of SNS say so, then it could lead to a disaster. So therefore, we would like to inform the companies that it is important for them to coincide their managerial philosophies along with the uses of SNS. In this way, the effectiveness of using SNS will be truly achieved. Thank you for listening to our presentation.